In this video, I'm going to demonstrate a really simple way that you can blend together different PBR materials and create some really nice effects using PBR Painter. And in this video, I'll be using Blender version 4.3 and PBR Painter 3.2. So this material in front of me is an example of the kind of result you can get. And basically all I've done is I've taken these two PBR materials, blended them together so that the original material looks like this. And then I've just strategically added this other material on top, so that I've now got this brand new material that is the combination of these two individual materials. Now I'm using a simple dirt and gravel mix here, but you could do this with absolutely anything that you want. And you can also combine as many materials as you'd like into one overall material. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of this material and create a new one. I'm just going to go through the process and the steps that I used to achieve this blending. First thing I'll do is I'll just add that ground material as the base material. And I'm going to do that with this multi-import. And I've got these PBR textures here ready to go. So I'm going to add a collection of these and just import. So this is my starting point. And this is material number 1, which I'm going to call ground. And now I'm just going to simply add that other material on top. Call this one gravel. And again, using the multi-import. Okay, so I've now added the two materials together, but it's obviously just replaced that underlying material because this one's just sitting on top. And you can see that if I change the opacity, we kind of blend between the two. And at this point, the naive way to kind of blend these together would be maybe to do something like this, where you just kind of go half opacity. Doesn't look particularly nice, so I'm going to show a better way, and that's using masks. And in particular, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask this gravel layer using the height map. So I'm going to add a new mask and change this to image texture, click OK. Now it's completely masked the layer because I've got nothing loaded in here. So I'm going to select this and I'm just going to grab the displacement map for this gravel layer. And what this will do is it will only add the gravel at the points where the gravel is highest. And if I preview that mask, this is what it looks like. And what we can do is we can play around with the color ramps to actually decide how we want to apply that gravel. So if I do something like this, I can add a little bit of gravel like that. And if I turn this preview off, what you can see now is that it's now selectively placing these little bits of gravel over the top. And then we can pull this across to get more of this material. And we now basically have control over how much of that gravel we want to add to this underlying ground. Something I realize I need to do is I need to actually go into the height and change this from bump to displace and bump, because I've actually got my plane subdivided. So I'm going to use the actual displacement, and I'm going to use this at a really low value for both of these. Like that. So that looks a lot nicer now. So that's why it was kind of looking weird in that previous example. So now we can look at it again, and we can see now by basically adjusting this opacity, we're adding and removing this gravel selectively. And we can do that again with this color ramp like this. So we can basically add it everywhere where the gravel is highest. We can kind of put that in. And you can also choose how sharp you want the boundaries between the two materials. So for example, right now we have it very sharp like this. And that's basically just cutting the rocks, which I think looks pretty nice in this case, because it looks like we've actually got rocks sitting on the top. But you could also adjust that and blend it more slowly like that. So that's the basic idea. And with that simple technique, you can mix and match all sorts of different materials. As I said, you can add many different materials together to get your final result. And when you're happy with your final material, you can just use the baking system to bake this out as a brand new set of PBR textures ready to go in your next project. Something important that I will point out is that you will want to change your mapping to link to the PBR texture mapping when it comes to this here. So basically what this does is it means that inside your gravel here, when you adjust the scale, the mask will adjust with that scale. So otherwise you're going to end up with an offset between your mask and your PBR textures, and it's not going to look as nice. So just make sure that you go into mapping and you turn on this link. Another thing you can do is you can actually get creative with how you use your displacement map. So right now I'm just using the gravel, and that's, as I said, masking based on the height of the stones in that gravel. But what I could also do is mix this with the ground one as well. So if I add another mask again, and this time I make this one the ground. Something you could do, for example, is now only add the gravel into the areas of the ground that are the lowest. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert this height map. And now what I can do is I can actually grab those kind of valleys in my ground. And if I multiply this with the other mask, what you end up with is basically the original mask for the gravel. So we're just grabbing the stones, only applied to the valleys of this ground. So if I increase this multiplier here, we can then decide how much we want to apply that. And then if I turn that off, the final result is that we have this kind of complex mixing between these two materials where we have this selective addition of the gravel just within the valleys of this ground. So that can be really useful because that means that you're not, for example, adding gravel on top of the rocks in the ground layer. You're only adding the gravel to the bits that go down in that ground layer. So again, if we turn this off, what you can see now is it's kind of populating the gravel into the valleys like that. So that can look really nice as well. Another reason that this can be useful is that we can now often get away with increasing the scale of our materials without it looking like we're repeating them. So for example, if I go into the ground and I make this to 3, it looks like that with no gravel added, so it's obviously repeating. But if we add the gravel and then maybe we offset this in some way, it now kind of hides that repeating nature of it, and we end up with a material with a larger scale because we've multiplied these two things together. So it's creating a unique material at every point across that surface. And again, you can then bake this out and then use this at a larger scale. And obviously the more complex you get with more layers, the more you can kind of get away with these benefits. And with that, I'll leave the video there. I hope you found it easy to understand. I hope you find it useful, and I hope you can use it to make all sorts of cool combinations of PBR materials just using your starting base materials. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you in another video. Cheers.